Mafoudi.
Question number 2, please.
We have empowered local councils to tackle the highway maintenance backlog, which is the result of a decade of underinvestment by the previous government. We have made an immediate start by providing an extra £500 million next year, an increase of nearly 40% for most councils. We will end the pothole plague on our roads, Mr. Speaker, and ensure safer journeys for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for that answer. I've met with the Roads Minister recently and also with National Highways about the need for investment in Seatonburn and Moor Farm roundabouts, critical pieces of infrastructure which are already struggling with capacity and congestion. Local councils and the North East Combined Authority have all highlighted that upgrades are going to be crucial for growth in the North East. So could the Secretary of State consider how this government can support the project and whether the scheme could test a new form of transport business case for projects intended to deliver growth in all of our regions?
Secretary of State.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for her question and know she is a committed advocate for improvements to the road network in the North East. I do recognise the importance of Moor Farm and Seatonburn roundabouts for her local area, and I can assure her that both are being considered as part of a pipeline of projects for our future road investment strategy.
A bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A recent Freedom of Information request revealed that of identified highway spending across the Bradford district by Bradford Council over the past 6 years, 49 million was spent within Bradford City itself, but only 4 million was spent within Keighley and my wider constituency, despite streets like Elliott Street in Silsden being in a very, very poor state of repair. So will the Secretary of State write to leaders at Bradford Council and remind them that highway spending needs to be spent equally across the whole of the Bradford district, including places like Keighley and Ilkley, not just within Bradford city centre itself?
Secretary of State.
I would say to the honourable gentleman that I'm not the sort of Secretary of State who's going to sit at my desk in Whitehall and instruct local authorities to spend certain amounts of money on certain roads. I expect local authorities to take strategic decisions based upon where the investment is needed, and I will leave it to local leaders to make those decisions.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Paul Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Too many British roads are in a shocking state of disrepair, as the Secretary of State says. In my constituency, Labour-run Merton Council has the worst roads in London and the second worst in the country, with 40% of local roads rated as poor by the Secretary of State's own department. Whilst I do indeed welcome the coming year's increase in funding, that is only a short-term measure and not based on need, with Merton and others having received less than authorities whose roads are in a better condition. As Labour-run Merton has failed to maintain its own roads, it's not being bailed out by their friends in government, will the Minister meet with me to discuss what action can be taken?
I'm very happy to meet with the honourable gentleman to ensure that roads in his constituency and across London are maintained to an adequate standard. The increase of 500 million that we allocated this year to highways maintenance represents an average 40% increase for local authorities. It will be making a difference, and I'm happy to discuss with him further.
Sam Rushell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The cost of transport to access... it's question number 3.
Minister.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'd like to answer this question along with questions 13 and 17. The government is committed to delivering the better, more reliable bus services that passengers deserve. We've already made significant progress introducing the Bus Services Bill into Parliament to help local leaders get the powers that they need, and announcing investment of over £1 billion to support and improve bus services.
Thank you. Can I thank the Minister for that answer as well? The cost of transport is a huge cost of living pressure for children and young people in my constituency trying to access education but also social and leisure opportunities. So what assurance can the Minister give me that the Buses Bill will end a system where buses and bus services are controlled by ideology to a system that puts them in the service of local people?
Minister.
I thank my friend for his question. The government knows how important local bus services are in providing access to education and allowing young people to get around. Empowering local leaders to improve services is at the heart of our reforms, including through the introduction of the Bus Services Bill, to ensure that bus services deliver for hard-working families and communities throughout the country.
Michael Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Worsley and Eccles face high levels of congestion when moving around our roads, especially during their rush hour commutes. Whilst we benefit from Greater Manchester's B network, it only takes a set of temporary traffic lights, roadworks or an accident to back things up. Can the Minister outline what steps are being taken to give the necessary powers and encouragement to our local communities and decision makers to create joined up public and private transport networks that alleviate congestion?
Minister.
My humble friend is absolutely right to highlight this issue, and he will know that this government is acting quickly to respond to his concerns. As outlined in the English Devolution White Paper, we will empower strategic authorities to play a greater role in coordinating their local road network. This includes removing unnecessary Secretary of State consent requirements for certain local highway decisions, potentially including lane rental schemes, which will speed up decision-making.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So many people who live in rural towns across my constituency rely on bus services to go to work, school and hospital appointments. Too often, buses are running late or never turn up at all. Last week, I met local resident Nicola from Emily, who told me when she was unable to drive, it was near on impossible for her daughter Olivia to attend after-school clubs. Can the Minister advise me on how this government will hold failing bus companies to account and help improve services in our local areas?
Minister.
As my constituency neighbour, the honourable friend will be, I understand the challenges that her constituents face. Look, we know that local bus services are not currently delivering for people around the country. We are committed to changing this, and our Bus Services Bill will give local leaders the tools that they need to deliver reliable buses that truly meet the needs of local communities, including in rural areas.
Sir Gavin Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that the Minister is truly passionate about advocating bus services, but if he was privileged enough to live in the beautiful village of Hixon in my constituency and wanted to get to the surgery in Great Hayward, he would have to travel into Stafford on a bus and then a bus from Stafford into Great Hayward. Could the Minister update the House as to what additional help Staffordshire can maybe look forward to receiving in terms of making sure that Hixon residents are able to get directly to Great Hayward for extra support for the County Council?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. This government is determined to empower local leaders to make decisions about their local bus services. They can choose between a variety of options in that toolkit, between franchising, which is now open to all local transport authorities. We're lifting the ban on municipal bus companies, and we're also improving enhanced partnerships. It's really for local leaders to make those decisions, and we're empowering them to do so.
Member Pottinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rural communities like mine in Stratford-on-Avon rely on bus services as a vital lifeline, but too often these services are limited and infrequent, and private operators dominate the market in my area. Yet there is no minimum service requirement to ensure that people can get to work, school or medical appointments. Will the Minister tell my constituents if the government will guarantee a minimum level of service so that rural communities are not left stranded?
Minister. The honourable member will be pleased to know that the Bus Services Bill includes the socially necessary local services measure. Under the new measure, local transport authorities operating under an enhanced partnership will need to identify local services which they consider socially necessary and put in place requirements that must be followed before such services can be changed or cancelled. They will also need to consider the alternative options that are available.
Tom Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I held a 2-hour question and answer session with Disability Action Yorkshire. One of the issues that came up was the inability for disabled people to use their bus passes before 9 o'clock, limiting them from getting to work or access leisure opportunities or see family and friends. So I wondered, wouldn't one of the best ways to improve local bus access be allow disabled people to access them before 9 o'clock? And if the Minister would agree with me.
Who would we know?
Thank the Honourable Member for their question. The government already invests £700 million into ENCTS in order to fund those bus passes. Obviously, under the last budget, we announced over £1 billion of funding in order to support buses. We changed the formula for BSIP, bus service improvement, to away from this competitive nature, those Hunger Games style contests held under the previous government. So his local area will have received funding, and they are able to use that funding to go above and beyond what is set on a national level.
Wendy Moore.
Question number 4, please.
Secretary of State.
Open access operators will continue to have a place in our reformed Great British Railways. We have supported new proposals from Wrexham, Shropshire and Midlands Railway, and existing track access rights will be honoured. Open access can provide benefits, but it must not come at the cost of better services for passengers and better value for taxpayers.
William Moore.
Mr. Speaker, in her recent letter to the Office of Rail and Road, the Transport Secretary appeared to push against open access agreements, and yet last week, she has mentioned today, the government signalled its intention to support the request to licence the Wrexham to London Euston line, which will come through Aldridge in my constituency. So I'd like to ask the Transport Secretary to clarify her position on the Wrexham to the Euston line, particularly regarding the inclusion of Aldridge train station, which, as she will be aware, thanks to the Labour Mayor, the funding has been raided and put into his pet projects.
Secretary of State.
I do appreciate the commitment of the Honourable Lady to making the case for a new station at Aldridge, but I would gently point out to her that in the 14 years of her government, indeed, including her own stint in the Department for Transport, this station failed to materialise. I know that the West Midlands Combined Authority have had to prioritise the delivery of schemes that are in construction at the moment. That seems to me to be a reasonable approach, but I appreciate that she will continue to make the case for her own station.
Ray Morris.
Thank you. Open access operator Grand Central already run 5 services daily from Sunderland to London King's Cross through my constituency that unfortunately currently do not stop. My constituents have endured years of poor rail services from Northern Rail with just one overcrowded 2-carriage train an hour, often cancelled or delayed. While I welcome this government's investment in 450 new trains for Northern Rail, we need some immediate solutions. And can I ask, will the Minister urge the ORR to approve the application from Grand Central to allow these trains to stop at stations in Laaoil constituency?
Open access operators currently account for 1% of our railways, and they do not always have the same public service obligations as other train operating companies. We have always supported open access operators where it genuinely adds value and does not divert revenue away from existing operators, all of which are supported by the taxpayer in some form at the moment. I would also add, we also need to make best use of constrained capacity on the rail network. And so ensuring that the railway can recover from problems on the railways is also important to me.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, sir. Talking of access, several years ago, Greater Anglia demolished half of Wickford Station to extend some of the platforms. But after nearly 3 years of endless excuses, missed deadlines, and now frankly broken promises, they still haven't rebuilt it. And I regret to say I've lost all confidence in the senior management of Greater Anglia. If they told me today was a Thursday, I'd double check it. So can I go over their head and ask the Secretary of State for a personal meeting with the Rail Minister so we can finally get Wickford Station rebuilt despite Greater Anglia rather than because of them?
I will happily ask the Rail Minister to meet with the Honourable Gentleman to ensure that progress can be made at Wickford.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that my right honourable friend will be delighted about the news that Go-Op will be operating a new mandate for return services between Swindon and Taunton. I wondered whether this, she would agree with me that this demonstrates the government's commitment to improving connectivity across the country, and whether we can hope for such improvements to connectivity in my little corner of the world in Berkshire.
I'm pleased my honourable friend has raised this proposal, which really does demonstrate the very pragmatic approach we've got to open access operators. It's also going to be the first cooperatively owned train service running anywhere in the UK. And so if there are any investors out there thinking about investing in this service, I would encourage them to look closely.
Question number 6.
Tuesday.
As part of our reforms to the railway, we have set out that we will continue to lease rolling stock when we take contracts into public ownership, but we will apply a single directing mind approach to eliminate barriers to sharing rolling stock better across the network. We will consider the best funding and financing structures for future orders and contracts in partnership with private capital.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Thank the Secretary of State for the answer. The Roscoes at the moment take over £1 billion worth of profit out of the railway. A substantial amount of that could be reinvested into improving a railway network. With the GB rail bill coming into Parliament soon, will the Minister seriously look at alternative financing models like Eurofima or even a publicly owned Roscoe that could deliver that rolling stock at a considerably lower price? Indeed, will the Secretary of State be more socialist and more ambitious with the bill?
I can assure the honourable gentleman that I do not lack any ambition when it comes to Great British Railways. It would cost billions in taxpayers' money to buy existing rolling stock at a time when there are very many pressures on the public purse. In terms of Eurofima, my officials have been engaging regularly with Eurofima to consider the potential for UK membership and how Eurofima finance could potentially be deployed in the UK.
Tracy Gilbert.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker. The Department recognises the critical importance of the East Coast Main Line and has invested £4 billion in a combination of infrastructure enhancements and rolling stock upgrades that will help to deliver journey time, reliability and capacity improvements. The full benefit of this investment will be felt with the introduction of a revised timetable in December 2025, and the Department continues to work closely with Network Rail to explore opportunities to improve performance and resilience.
Tracy Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for that answer. My constituents have raised concerns on the reliability of services on the East Coast Main Line, with one constituent receiving delay repay compensation on 5 out of 6 journeys he took over a 2-month period. I welcome the correspondence I've had with the Rail Minister on the action of the Department of Transport are taken with rail partners, including through the East Coast Digital Programme. Can my honourable friend confirm that the first trains utilising new digital signalling technology will be on the tracks by the end of this year? And can she say when she expects passengers to feel the full benefit of the welcome upgrade? Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. The East Coast Digital Programme is delivering digital signalling on 100 miles of the East Coast Main Line, and that technology will deliver an inherent improvement to service reliability and uplift performance and capacity across the line, including for her constituents. The first trains to start running under digital signalling are forecast from early 2026, and the number of services running under the digital signal will then increase until the full programme is expected to be complete in the early 2030s.
Father of the House, Edward Lee.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to answer this question along with question 21. It is our ambition through public ownership to deliver a more affordable railway. This year's fare increase of 4.6% is the lowest absolute increase in 3 years. We are committed to reforming the overcomplicated fare system and expanding ticketing innovation like pay-as-you-go in urban areas across the country.
Sir Edward.
When the Secretary of State finally steps in and knocks heads together and we get our Azuma train to Grimsby via Market Raisin, will the Secretary of State instruct the railway company to name the locomotive Margaret Thatcher to remind us all that the best way actually to reduce the cost of rail services is to end restricted trade union practices?
Mr. Speaker, I hate to disappoint the father of the House, but I'm afraid I won't be making such a commitment today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The British people pay some of the highest rail fares in Europe. However, this government seems to prioritise the size of the socialist state, kowtowing to trade unions with radical public pay rises and nationalisation plans. So, instead, will she please focus on improving the lot of commuters, particularly Romford's hard-working commuters, and take real steps to reduce rail fares and improve railway services?
Nice to see you back.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that the honourable gentleman has the gall to raise this issue when under his government fares rose at around twice the speed of wages. I would also point out to him that since 2020, train operating companies have paid out nearly £1 billion to their parent companies, signed off by Conservative ministers in the last government. If he wants to talk about costs and value for money on the railway, I suggest he looks in the mirror to start off with.
John Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it was in fact a Conservative Secretary of State who forced fare rises on Transport for London in exchange for COVID emergency funding? And what steps will she be taking to put TfL on a better footing in the future, including backing great projects like the one in my constituency to upgrade and provide step-free access to one of the busiest stations in the country at South Kensington?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. In the middle of a global pandemic, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite was still obsessed with settling old political scores on fares in London rather than doing right by the capital. I can vividly remember walking into a meeting with the then Secretary of State to discuss how we keep services safely running, which ended up with him telling me this would have been so much easier if you hadn't frozen fares. Unlike the party opposite, Mr. Speaker, this government will always do right by the capital as well as the rest of the country.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask that this UK government doesn't follow the approach taken by the Scottish government when it comes to public ownership? ScotRail fares are set to increase again in April with an inflation-busting increase. This follows on from an 8.7% hike last year and the reintroduction of peak fares in September. Does the Minister agree with me that the SNP should be making rail more affordable, but instead it has hit passengers with painful fare hikes time and time again? The increases are bad for Scotland's rail passengers, bad for our economy and bad for the environment.
I can assure my honourable friend that we are going to bring the train operating companies into public ownership properly, and we won't be repeating the mistakes that we've seen in Scotland.
Shadow Minister Jerome Mayhew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very interested by that last answer, actually, because the government does think that nationalisation will reduce the cost of rail travel. So what lessons has the Minister learned from the SNP's nationalisation of ScotRail?
We will be increasing value for money in the way in which we operate our railways. To start off with, we will be getting rid of up to £100 million a year in management fees that we are currently paying out of the public purse to the train operating companies. We are determined to drive up performance on our railways and give better value for money to the taxpayer.
Well, the latest experiment in nationalisation has shown in just 2 years state inefficiency has pushed up costs, not reduced them, by £600 million, forcing fares to rise as delays have increased, customer satisfaction has slumped, and services have been cut, not improved. The data shows that in England, Greater Anglia has been the best performer in the country, saving money for taxpayers while serving passengers with modern, punctual trains. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Minister is about to launch a public consultation on nationalisation, one that's been as delayed as ScotRail trains. I'm told that even the plan to publish it today has been further delayed. The excuse is number 10 on the line. So if the Secretary of State consults, she has to be prepared to listen. Will she now listen to the deep concerns of the rail industry, not just to the ever-generous unions, and avoid another disastrous nationalisation?
I can assure the honourable gentleman that the consultation on establishing Great British Railways is coming soon, and I look forward to discussing it further with him. I am confident that by bringing the management of track and train together, we can strip out duplication in our railways, provide better value for the taxpayer, and ensure that trains are turning up on time with reliable and punctual services. That's what we're going to be delivering.
Question number 10, please.
This government recognises the importance of high-quality transport infrastructure as part of a well-functioning integrated transport network. We're supporting all local authorities to improve transport infrastructure, including through our £1.6 billion investment in local roads. I know his rural roads are littered with potholes. That's why they're getting a share of our 50% uplift.
Goldsborough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Norfolk's economy to fire on all cylinders needs a decent rural road network. The Thickthorn junction in my South Norfolk constituency is outdated and urgently needs upgrading to support the growth and unlock new homes. Will the Minister back this project and visit to see firsthand why the government should put Norfolk at the heart of our investment plans?
Minister.
My honourable friend is a fantastic champion for the needs of his rural constituents. The central mission of this government is to support economic growth, and this is one of a number of road investments under consideration. In the last week, we've approved upgrades to 4 major road projects across England. On this specific scheme, I hope to be able to say more in the coming weeks, and perhaps I will be visiting his constituents.
There you are.
See you later, lads.